Welcome to Ship Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we are here for part one of a four-part series as we journey through The Haunting of Hill House, or The Haunting, or The House on Haunted Hill, depending on how you came across the text. But this is chapters 1 through 3 of The Masterpiece by Shirley Jackson.
Masterpiece.
Masterpiece.
Building it up. I'm not there yet. This is my first read-through of this book. You have read this before. And apparently this is a big book in a lot of authors' lives. So.
Yeah, well, I think let's get started where the text gets started.
Okay.
I'm going to read the opening paragraph.
Okay.
Did that opening paragraph catch you?
Lay it on me.
No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed by some to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years, and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there, walked alone.
Okay. Good build-up for a horror novel here.
Well, someone else thinks so as well.
Okay.
And that someone might know a little something about the horror genre. It is Stephen King.
Okay.
And we get this on 282 and 283 of Danse Macabre, which is basically his treatise on the horror genre. On 282, he quotes that opening paragraph and says, "I think there are few, if any, descriptive passages in the English language that are any finer than this. It is the sort of quiet epiphany every writer hopes for, words that somehow transcend words, words which add up to a total greater than the sum of the parts. Analysis of such a paragraph is a mean and shoddy trick, and should almost always be left to college and university professors. Those lepidoterists, I'm not sure how to say that word,
Okay.
of literature, who, when they see a lovely butterfly, feel that they should immediately run into the field with a net, catch it, and kill it with a drop of chloroform, and mount it on a white board, and put it in a glass case, where it will still be beautiful, and just as dead as horse shit." He goes on to say, "All I really want to do is point out how many things this single paragraph does. It begins by suggesting that Hill House is a living organism, tells us that this live organism does not exist under conditions of absolute reality. That, because although here I should add that I may be making an induction Mrs. Jackson did not intend, it does not dream. It is not sane. The paragraph tells us how long its history has been, immediately establishing that historical context that is so important to the haunted house story, and it concludes by telling us that something walks in the rooms and halls of Hill House. All of this in 2 sentences. Jackson continues an even more unsettling ideal by implication. She suggests that Hill House looks all right from the surface. It is not the creepy old Marston place from Salem's Lot, with its boarded-up windows, mangy roof, and peeling walls. It's not the tumble-down brooding place at the ends of all those dead-end streets, those places where children throw rocks by daylight and fear to venture after dark. Hill House is looking pretty good. But then, Norman Bates was looking pretty good, too, at least on the surface. There are no drafts in Hill House, but it, and those foolish enough to go there, we presume, does not exist under conditions of absolute reality. Therefore it does not dream. Therefore it is not sane. And, apparently, it kills."
Okay. It is a good setup. It is. And that opening line is what is absolutely necessary to catch your reader's attention, to get them into the story, and we learn a lot just from that opening line.
So you mentioned that this is an important book in a lot of authors' lives.
Yes.
A lot of authors were also important to the writing of this book.
Okay.
Did you catch any literary references?
We talked about this briefly before we started filming. I said, no. Why would I be looking for big literary references? This is the granddaddy of them all. This is what started it.
Well, first off, to cut you off there, but I'll let you continue. If you were looking for literary references, there are only about 1 million.
Okay.
But this is also referenced outwardly in literature about 1 billion times. So
Okay.
we can get into what I caught, but you were saying.
So when I was reading this, and like for some reason it just didn't click with me, and perhaps I've just been busy this week and wasn't thinking in the right mindset. This was written in the, would we agree on 50s, 60s? Is that
1959.
1959?
So essentially the 60s,
60s.
but the 50s.
This, in the way I was reading it, defined the modern horror genre. Stephen King attributes this as one of the greatest texts ever written for the horror genre. Neil Gaiman contributes this as like a big influence in his writing. This is what has established this modern horror genre. All these modern horror authors that we're reading now get their chops from Shirley Jackson.
That's not what you said.
Is that not what I said?
That is not what
What
you
did
said.
I say?
You said established the haunted house.
The haunted house genre.
Which is absolutely untrue.
Yes.
And even if you want to go rudimentary, the ideas of a haunted house are with us back to the founding of civilization.
Okay.
There's so many references in ancient religions to a house which may not be entered, or a domain that may not be entered, or the domain of a god. So if you're looking at the spirit, the essence of the thing, this is absolutely not that. But that is different than the branching off point of modern horror.
Okay.
And I think what we're talking about when you want to say the branching off of modern horror, right? This is not a text that is dependent upon the spooky.
Okay.
We have a scientific reason for being here. We have a scientific basis for looking in to these things.
Okay.
And even then, so the mediums of the 30s often touted themselves at, so I hate to keep regressing.
We're fine.
But we get all of these hints in modern culture, like the Thor movies. Thor says that magic is just science that you don't understand yet. Do you remember that from the very first Thor? That thought process was alive and well as long as science has been around. Because science, you're trying to explain what is there.
Yes.
And if you can explain what is there, by God, you can make something happen, can't you? So a lot of the mediums of the 30s sort of promoted themselves on this cutting edge between science and spirituality.
Okay.
Because if spirituality exists, which is a presumption that was absolutely there,
Yes.
there's a science to it.
Okay.
And that's how people presented themselves. But this is where we really get, we are here in this haunted house for a scientific study.
Yes. That is the reason everyone's been invited.
Yeah.
And
We should have gone through a rundown, shouldn't we?
a character rundown here?
Yeah, or something. So essentially what has happened is Dr. Montague has sent out letters to people trying to bid them to this house so that he could do a study on, I think he says, the psychological effects of the house, something like that. He's trying to study a haunted house through exposing the people being placed into this haunted house after they have been told the history of the haunted house. And he has hand-selected these individuals because of a prior dereliction towards the inexplicable.
Okay.
So Eleanor and Theodora are the only two that ended up showing up. Luke was a member of the household, and Dr. Montague is there, obviously, to do the studying.
Okay. It seems like from at least this part of the novel, the majority of our speaking has come from Eleanor. We do get some brief moments with Theodora and Luke, but Eleanor seems to be the speaker for the novel here. We also have the Dudleys, who are the keepers of the house, the grounds people who work the house, who live there, and are the only ones who stay there.
Right, but they are immediately dismissed as not there. Right?
Yes.
So Theodora and Eleanor have a conversation in the presence of, I believe, Mrs. Dudley, as if she is not present.
Yes, and they always seem a little off-putting. They always seem like they're just a background. They're furniture.
Right. Which I don't believe to be accidental on Shirley Jackson's behalf.
Okay.
This is something that these characters are doing. They are not observing black characters,
Okay.
but they're trying to observe ghosts.
Okay.
So I think there's something to be said there. But back to these literary references. There's only about 1 million. And I'm trying to find the one that I was... Let me read this and see if something sounds familiar to you. If I can find this...
While you're looking for that, now that we talked about it a little bit, I'm like, oh, God, yeah, you're probably right. This is a good Victorian horror, to the point where they sit in the parlor and tell stories while drinking cigars and brandy. So absolutely, my mistake. We're getting there. But anyway, lay it on me. Literary references.
I've got so many notes for this, I'm trying to figure out where it's at.
Okay, okay.
I believe maybe 7... And their father had been dead for not quite a month. Showers of stones had fallen on their house, without any warning or any indication of purpose or reason, dropping from the ceilings, rolling loudly down the walls, breaking windows, and pattering madly on the roof. The stones continued intermittently for 3 days, during which time Eleanor and her sister were less unnerved by the stones than by the neighbors and the sightseers who gathered daily outside of the front door, by their mother's blind, hysterical insistence that all of this was due to malicious backbiting people on the block who had had it in for her ever since she came. After 3 days, Eleanor and her sister were removed from the house to the house of a friend, and the stones stopped falling. And the stones stopped, nor did they ever return, although Eleanor and her sister and her mother went back to living in the house. And the feud in the entire neighborhood was never dead. The feud with the entire neighborhood was never dead. The story had been forgotten by everyone except for the people Dr. Montague had insulted. It had certainly been forgotten by Eleanor and her sister, each of whom supposed at the time that the other was responsible. Does that sound familiar?
Sounds like Carrie.
What's Eleanor's sister's name?
What's Eleanor's sister's name?
Yeah.
Is it Carrie?
It's Carrie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so we're going back to, I'm going to clarify my argument here. Stephen King draws from this and references this.
I never said he didn't. You were making two completely different arguments.
But Shirley Jackson is not referencing Carrie.
No, Shirley Jackson's not referencing Carrie.
Okay.
Shirley Jackson's referencing a whole lot of shit, though.
Okay.
You didn't catch any of it.
What else do we have?
Now, I'll start with the one that is most questionable, so long as I can find it. Now, this is compelling, isn't it? Me searching for this. Page 22.
Ironically enough, I think we actually have the same page numbers here.
Don't do it, Eleanor, told the little girl. Insist on your cup of stars. Once they have you trapped into being like everyone else, you will never see your cup of stars again. What does that sound like?
I don't know.
We read it for the channel.
To the point that I even, dog-eared this, because I'm like, I like this quote, this is nice.
We read it on the channel, and you picked that quote.
Really?
Yes. Don't you remember Darrell drinking the stars?
Okay, is this As I Lay Dying? Okay.
Now, I won't, As I Lay Dying was 29 years old as of this book being written.
Okay.
So I can't say for sure that is a literary reference. But drinking your stars sounds a lot like Darrell dipping his cup into the bucket of stars to drink it.
And either that or I really like star quotes because I dog-eared this page so I could read that quote.
You do like star quotes. It's because you're a hipster.
Okay.
But what type of character was Darrell?
He was a dreamer. He was
haunted.
He was haunted, yes.
What type of character is Eleanor?
Haunted.
Well, I'll be damned.
I'll be damned. Look at that.
Going backwards from the text, page 38, the blue room. Who staged in the blue room? It's Eleanor.
Yes.
Do we have a blue room in the history of literature?
Yeah.
We read it for the channel.
We did. It's Poe.
Mask of the Red Death.
There you go.
The blue room was birth.
Okay.
In the Mask of the Red Death.
Okay.
Eleanor seems young and naive, doesn't she?
Yes. That's actually, I've got that all listed out. Characters by colors, symbolism of the colors. So
Who's in the green room?
Green room is Theodora.
Do you remember what the green room was in the Mask of the Red Death?
What is the green room?
Adolescence.
Okay.
Eleanor also chose her red sweater and red sandals.
Okay.
It was the Mask of the Red Death haunting the house, wasn't it?
It was.
Now we get to a purple room.
The parlor room, essentially.
That is either youth in The Mask of the Red Death, or violet, depending on how you're interpreting the color. Violet was imminent death. Now, the other two characters, unfortunately, are in a yellow
And pink.
room, which do not exist in the text of The Mask of the Red Death, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay.
However, orange is close to yellow. Yellow was adulthood, and that is Dr. Montague.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know if this is Shirley Jackson stepping forward into her own while grabbing from the past, and we are supposed to understand what orange and pink mean through the text.
Okay.
Which is definitely possible and a great way to make a literary reference and a literary argument in your text.
Well, I did note on here that all the characters, all their colors, because anytime you get color in any form of literature, it means something, obviously. I've made a huge argument for The Great Gatsby in color. I agree with this here. And I was going to point out that I would like to continue reading to see if the characters are representative of the color they chose, or if there's something that's been connected here. Because if that's the argument, we would say that Theodora would be our intelligent, resourceful one. Eleanor would be the feminine, strong character, strength, purity, things like that. Luke would be a very...
Luke is a liar.
Okay.
He is a liar.
Yes. If red is a symbol of strength and power, pink would be the illusion of red. He gives off the illusion of strength and power, but really he is very soft on the inside, things like that. And yellow would be brightness, bringing everyone together, things like that. So, did make that note there, so I don't feel as bad for reading this text. Anyway, do you have some more to say about that? Or more literary references you want to flaunt around at me?
So there's a billion in here,
Okay.
so I'm not even sure where to begin or end
Okay.
with this. But in delay there lies no plenty.
Okay.
Remember, Eleanor keeps quoting that. She can't remember where it's from. It's from some song she knows.
Okay.
It's actually from Shakespeare. It's from Twelfth Night. I am not particularly well versed in Twelfth Night, but from where it comes, present mirth has present laughter. What's to come is still unsure. In delay there lies no plenty. Then come kiss me sweet and 20. Youth is a stuff will not endure.
Okay. So good on Shirley Jackson for planting that one early.
Well, who are the young ones?
Who were the young ones? It'd be Eleanor, wouldn't it?
And?
Theodora?
Yeah.
Okay.
Adolescence and childhood?
Yes.
Adolescence and birth, I suppose. So there is a lot going on, and there's a billion. There are a billion little literary references here.
Okay.
But if we want to get into the text as it is by itself, 12 and 13, not 10 and 11. We get this quote on 12 and carrying forward on to 13. She crashed into a little lady, sending the packages in all directions. And then on 13, it did not seem possible to scoop up the fragments of tomato and cheesecake. I just want you to remember that, because books, as we know, are not written linearly.
Okay.
Right? You write through a draft, you go back, you go back, you go back. So I think that's something that's in there. So Shirley Jackson also, is there something you'd like to touch on?
Let's talk about the house a little bit here.
Okay.
What we know about the house. The house is built up like a character. The house is described like a character, almost human-like, things like that. That is absolutely necessary in this book, in this genre, because if it's just a house and it's just haunted, we lose that good horror sense. The choice to make the house a character in its own makes the character living. And I think you highlighted that in just the first paragraph of this. So in that, there is more mystery to this. There is more that can be happening with this beyond the fact that it's just a building with walls.
And there will be more mystery as we go forward.
Yes. That is absolutely necessary. Have you ever read House of Leaves? Daniel, I can't remember the last name right now. Zubikowski, something like that?
I have not.
Okay. I would make the argument as well that he has drawn some pull from this here, because the entire novel centers around a living house. So, very interesting here. Maybe this is something else that Shirley Jackson's been contributing to the world of modern horror literature. But I do think that is absolutely necessary to make that house a character. Otherwise, we get a flat piece. Now there's more dynamic to it. Well done.
Yeah, so that's part of it being a Victorian literature, piece of Victorian literature.
Okay.
Drawing from Victorian literature is that the house itself is a character.
Okay.
And this house will definitely become a character, but more so than the house becoming a character, we're going to see a little bit the characters becoming the character of the house.
Okay.
Which is a very haunting type of thought.
Now, if you want to go on just like baseline horror here, there are a lot of tropes that are building this up. This does feel very cinematic in a way. And like I said, maybe Shirley Jackson's the one who started all this, started this modern horror thing here. But we get the arrival to the town, and we get the Harbinger of Doom.
Yeah.
Where as soon as she gets to the town, they say, don't go.
Well,
Turn
even
around.
before that.
Before that, Dr. Montague says, don't even stop in the town. Don't bother.
And before that, we get, well, I guess it's after that part, but before getting to the town, we get the misfortune of running into a little old lady, don't we?
We do.
Which is another trope of the horror genre.
Absolutely
A little bit of bad luck on the way to worse luck.
Yes. Once we finally get to the house and it's not defined as a creepy house, but there's something ominous about it. There's something living about it. We get the innkeeper, the creepy innkeeper. The Dudleys? Yes, the Dudleys, who live there, who seem to be part of the house but not living at all. Who are just there as basically furniture, who are off-putting, trying to get them away from the house. So much so that Mr. Dudley doesn't even let her in to start with. You're not coming in here.
Right.
We're keeping you out. We then move on to the scene in the woods, where it's supposed to be just a nice picnic scene between the girls. They go out to the brook, they're doing all this, and something in the woods scares them. That unknown being, I think they dismiss it as like a rabbit or something like that. But something is lurking in the woods. All of this is very modern cinematic horror. You watch any modern horror movie, you're going to get that. The Harbinger of Doom telling you to stay away. The little bit of bad luck. Once you get there, the person who runs the place who's just not quite right. The initial scare. We're all building up.
Things to make you uncomfortable.
Yes, everything makes you uncomfortable. Everything serves a purpose, but it's just building up right now. So far, I'm not crazy about this text. It's okay.
It's great. One of the subversive things I'm trying to find here.
Okay.
Shirley Jackson forces you into small turns of phrase, which you would not catch.
Okay.
But your mind very much does.
All right.
So on page 7, we get this quote: "Caring for her mother, lifting a cross old lady from her house from her chair to her bed, setting out endless little trays of soup and oatmeal." We are forced to say, lifting a cross.
Okay.
And there's another one in here where we are forced to say something, but I can't find it. So there's this on page 22. She nearly stopped forever just outside Ashton. She nearly stopped forever just outside Ashton because she came to a tiny cottage buried in a garden. We were forced to say, she nearly stopped forever.
Okay.
Now, there's another one in here, I can't find it. But it's one of these small turns of phrase that Shirley Jackson plants inside a larger phrase and a larger context, but she makes you say this one small thing, which is very unnerving.
Okay.
She almost stopped forever.
Okay.
Lifting a cross, right? The phrase is lifting a cross old lady, in which cross old lady is the clause you're paying attention to.
Yes.
But you very much pick up on lifting a cross.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Very subversive, this text.
I'm not saying this is bad yet, but I think it just hasn't really picked up. I think it has a lot of good potential.
Well,
but I think we were just in the beginnings here. We're setting the scene. We're getting things moving. Things are being set into motion. But I think we are going to get there with this. I'm hoping so.
I think that you are. I think that you're perhaps not giving enough credit yet.
Okay.
So we get this on 29. She sat back against her car seat and closed her eyes. Hill House, she thought. You're as hard to get into as heaven. How hard is it to get into hell?
Pretty easy.
So where are we?
Okay, so we're kind of doing a...
We're not in heaven.
No.
It seems pretty easy to get into hell. So if you're not in heaven or hell, where are you?
Purgatory.
Where are we going? The haunted house.
Okay.
So again, we have Shirley Jackson setting up this small phrase that for this little not quite riddle.
Okay.
That if this is that, and we know how easy it is to get into hell, where must we be? So we're setting up so many little things.
Okay.
Since the gate was so clearly locked and double locked and chained and barred, who, she wondered, wants so badly to get in? She made no attempt to get out of her car. There's one of those little phrases, isn't it? Who, she wondered, wants so badly to get in? She made no attempt to get out.
Okay.
Right? These weird little stopping points that we don't stop at, but your mind very much does.
All right.
Is things that are very difficult to read over, and they're difficult to read over because they contain something else, which is living, right?
Okay.
Housed inside this paragraph is a small living statement that forces you to question something else.
Interesting.
So we've got all these small clauses, these small phrases that live inside that are housed inside a larger piece of text.
Okay.
Now what that's doing is very much on a meta level. We are haunting each page with things we are forced to recognize, things that are floating around in the back of our head, but we never really pick up on.
Okay. Now I keep, for some reason, bringing up the idea that this defined modern cinematic horror. That's hard to do in text. It's hard to embed those little mysteries, embed those little things that make us think, that leave something that we may not see, but it's easily done in film. So this is, now that you think about it, there's a lot going on with this here, and it's being well done.
Well, so Stephen King, On Writing, I believe it was, argued that, I think is right near the phrase that's very popular, that literature is a uniquely portable magic. He goes on to talk about how it's also a form of, not mind control necessarily, but telepathy.
Okay.
Because I'm speaking to you without speaking.
Fair.
These are all things from my head that I am implanting in yours through this text. So in that way, we are haunting another individual.
Okay.
So the very act of reading is forcing you to do something you may or may not want to do. Forcing you into ideas you may or may not have had, and probably, at least before the text, never have had.
Okay. The last paragraph here of chapter 3, I marked to the point that it felt weird. It was different, it wasn't right. But when you think about it in that way, if I may, 6 miles away, Mrs. Dudley awakened, looked at her clock, thought of Hill House, and shut her eyes quickly. Mrs. Gloria Sanderson, who owned Hill House and lived 300 miles away from it, closed her detective story, yawned, and reached up to turn off her light, wondering briefly if she had remembered to put the chain on the front door. Theodore's friend slept, so did the doctor's wife and Eleanor's sister. Far away, in the trees over Hill House, an owl cried out, and toward morning a thin, fine rain began, misty and dull. If we're embedding things here, and we're embedding the fact that this house is a living entity, it is so powerful that it is starting to embed itself at a distance. The house is putting itself into other characters' thoughts, and it's also, in that same paragraph, showing complete isolation. These characters are away from everyone who's important to them. They are alone now. But the house is still part of this.
There's another very big thing that paragraph is doing.
Okay.
That comes shortly after everyone else in the house has gone to sleep, yes?
Yes.
So not only is everyone in the house asleep, but the woman who takes care of the house is asleep.
Yes.
She's trying to sleep,
But
she'll go back.
Yeah.
The woman who owns the house is asleep. People who know people inside the house, they're asleep. That house is not.
Okay.
That house is not. It goes straight back to that very first opening paragraph, doesn't it?
Okay.
Hill House is not asleep. That owl is part of Hill House because he's crying. It's in the trees above Hill House.
Okay.
The rain is part of Hill House because the rain's going to keep him inside.
Okay.
You're not going anywhere in the rain.
You're trapped.
So there are so many things going on here on a meta level.
Okay.
Did you notice all of the threes in this text?
The threes?
Yes.
Not particularly.
So Dr. Montague had rented the house for 3 months.
Okay.
I don't know if I have them all written down. Everything is happening in threes.
Okay.
So anytime 3 comes up, you want to remember that.
Okay.
Do you know why?
Lay it on me.
Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.
Okay.
It's a biblical thing.
Okay. Throughout most religions, that seems to be a thing, that things come in threes. Things happen in threes. So you do get some religious symbolism to that.
The stones
obviously.
continued intermittently for 3 days.
Okay.
So lots of things in this book are going back to threes.
All right. Where else would you like to go with this? Because like I said, this is my first introduction to this, and I am still building up towards what is coming. I'm expecting a lot at this point. I'm expecting not to be disappointed.
So I would like to... I keep pointing to other texts because it's just so rampant with this.
Okay.
This is like a literary highway, this book.
Okay.
We get the stone lions, right?
Okay.
And we get the rabbit in the yard.
Okay.
We've got the nice big house.
All right. Stone animals.
By Kelly Link?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, we read that for the channel.
Absolutely.
There is something about that text. It is a long short story
Yes.
that's very haunting.
It is.
And you can't quite place
You
it.
can't put your finger on what's going on, but it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. On 78, so we read 92 pages. 78. I didn't mark it in my text, but there's something about someone dallied in the garden with some silly lout. I can't remember what that's about.
Okay.
The sisters. Something about the sisters there. One of the sisters... Was it the sister?
The Crane sisters?
Yeah, I look like an idiot now, but there's something going on there because someone was dallying in the garden with a silly lout, and that's where we see the rabbits.
Okay. See, I had a good point that had just popped in my head about the Crane sisters, and I've lost it at this point.
I think there's a lot going on there.
Yes, yes. You do get the bit of a history of the house and how, it came to be, how to be passed down a little bit. And the house is basically born on turmoil.
Yes.
The house is born on turmoil between families. It's basically, at its beginning, is already tearing them apart. So maybe we see some development from the house here, that like the house is testing its skills in the beginning, in so much of a simple thing that it could have been any house that did this. But it just so happens to have been Hill House.
Well, there's something with those sisters, isn't there?
Okay.
There's another pair of sisters we get in this text, isn't there?
Yes. Eleanor and Carrie?
Eleanor and Carrie.
Okay.
Now, with the Crane sisters, what happens with the house?
The house goes to the oldest.
One of them steals it.
Okay.
The younger sister thinks she steals it.
Yes.
It's both of our houses. You stole it. What happens at the beginning of this text? How does Eleanor get to the house?
She steals the car, basically.
She steals the car.
Okay.
Now, Eleanor is the older sister. In the story of the Crane sisters, it is the older sister that gets the house. The older sister is not married.
Okay.
Eleanor
Is not married.
is not married.
Okay. Interesting. So maybe we get a bit of a mirror going on here that would prove that this is the house basically flexing its chops. This is what it does. And we do get...
Or I'm sorry, Eleanor's the younger sister, isn't she? But in either way, it is the sister who does not have a husband, which is stealing something.
Yes. If that is the case, the older sister is the one who believes she's entitled to it. She's like, no, you can't take this car. This is our car. We need this car. The same with the house and the Crane sisters. So there is a lot going on, obviously. Like I said briefly, I think I need to go purchase a copy of this so I can start taking more notes in it, because I don't want to mark up my library book here. But I am interested to see where this is going forward.
Well, one small thing about characters. We've talked a little bit about Theodora being a strong woman.
Okay.
We've talked about Eleanor being a bit anal retentive.
Okay.
We've talked about Luke being the bad guy. We've really sort of overlooked the character of Dr. Montague, haven't we?
True. Would we say that's because he is a relatively passive character?
Is he? He is the inciting event.
He is the one who brings them all together, yes. He is the one who sits them down and tells them what's going on, the story of this house. But, I mean, if we're starting to get our suspicions going, is he there for other reasons?
Well, it's funny you should say that.
Funny I should say that.
In these chapters, the very beginning, we get that Dr. Montague is going to exclude anyone from his study that seems to be seeking publicity.
True.
Shortly thereafter, we are told that Dr. Montague is putting together this story, this study, is going to be writing a paper and a book for publicity.
Okay.
So he is trying to discredit and discontinue anyone who's doing the same thing as him.
Okay. The Doctor is a suspicious character, and especially if we're looking with how modern horror works out, we should be distrusting of the Doctor. He's the one who brought them all together. He obviously knows more about this house than anyone else. So that's going to be a little interesting read to see how he develops as a character. My assumption would be that since he is the guide and the one who knows what's going on here, he will be the first one to go missing or something will happen to. They will lose the Doctor in some way, so they are now completely alone and only with themselves, what they know.
I think you're gonna like the text.
Okay.
Eventually.
It's not bad so far. It's just it hasn't just won me over completely.
So do you have any criticisms so far?
Criticisms so far? I feel like you're just going to yell at me because you made the point of like how she's embedding the text in. It is an easy read. It really is. Especially from being from the 50s, 60s, whatever. It does feel very pop fiction, almost. It is a simple book to pick up and read, and maybe that's a good thing for Shirley Jackson. It's very approachable by a lot of people. It's readable by a lot of people, but if you look deep enough, there's a lot more going on. And maybe that's what completely just dismissed this. I felt like I was reading Agatha Christie, and I'm just like, along for the ride.
Well, I think that's part of what makes it such a haunting text, is that you're going to get through it, and there's going to be things turning in the back of your mind that you don't notice are there.
Okay.
But the one thing that I don't like about this text is how quickly Eleanor comes to like Theodora.
Okay.
And Theodora comes to like Eleanor.
They do fall in super quick to the point where they're like, oh, we're cousins. This is wonderful. Let's be best friends forever.
Eleanor's inner turmoil does not let on that would happen.
Okay.
It lets on that she might witness Theodora and enjoy Theodora and try to be friends with Theodora, but she just melds with her very quickly. And the dialogue between the two, it's hard to tell them apart even.
Okay.
Right?
Well, you ever been alone in an uncomfortable situation? Once someone is there to share in that situation with you, you immediately cling to that first person you can speak with.
Sure, but that does not mean that you're one with them.
Developing this huge bond.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what throws me off a little bit about that, especially with Eleanor's inner turmoil. She is a person desperate to claim her own life.
Okay.
And she's dignified. Right? She knows exactly how she's supposed to treat the Dudleys.
Okay.
Which, by the way, Dudley, has there ever been a good Dudley?
I don't think there's ever been a good Dudley.
Do you know what Theodora means?
What does Theodora mean?
Theodora means God's gift as a name. How does Theodora like to be called?
Go on.
Theo.
God? Interesting.
So it is interesting.
All right. I'm excited to see where this goes, honestly. I'm only 3 chapters in, so I can't really say much more about this.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth here.
Okay.
So this is part 1 of a 4-part series as we journey through The Haunting, or The House on Haunted Hill, or The Haunting of Hill House, depending on how you picked up the book, by Shirley Jackson. If you like this sort of thing, leaving a like really helps us out. And if you've gotten this far in the video but have not yet hit the like button or the subscribe button, maybe do so.